exercise their right to vote and to speak to all the different articles. There are a couple of things that are particular to the fact that we'll be meeting outside at Westford Academy. Dress appropriately, depending on what the weather is that day. Make sure that you're wearing your mask. As you come in, there'll be some items pertaining to the various motions that you can pick up, as well as a copy of the motions themselves. There will be 4 microphones set up for people to speak at. You can speak at whatever microphone is closest to you at the time. Please don't touch the microphones. If you do accidentally touch them, we'll sanitize them before the next person comes up. Of course, you can remove your mask to speak at the microphone and then put it back on again. The chairs will be set up so that they're appropriately distant, with some groupings together for families who come together, folks who live in the same household. There'll be shade tents on the sides of the field, along with a first aid tent for anybody who needs that. In the event of inclement weather, the town meeting will be rescheduled to the next day at 9 a.m. That would be the 18th at 9 a.m. So hope for a beautiful day, as I'm hoping for, and we can just spend some time outdoors together and conduct our business at the same time. I hope to see a lot of people there.
Great. Jody, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So I just want to add, I'm not sure that you mentioned this, Angela, but that we're not going to be serving lunch. And so we will be breaking at noon for about an hour and 15 minutes. And we hope everyone can go home, have their lunch, refresh, and come back for the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay. Now I get to the warrant now. So we're just going to go in order, and as appropriate, we'll have the correct person speak to it, and then any questions, please feel free to type them into the question section on the GoToMeeting software. The first one, Article 1, approve unpaid bills from previous fiscal years, and I believe this is going to be dismissed. So nice, easy one to start off with. Article 2, fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments. Jody and Dan, do you want to speak to this?
Sure, I'll start off and let Dan finish it up. But it was evident that we were running a deficit for this year with revenue losses due to COVID. So we were able to tighten up several of the town budgets to try to improve that deficit situation. They are printed in the motions document. Most of these are personnel reductions, like treasurer collector 15,000, technology 36,000, town clerk 17. We actually combined a position when someone retired to reduce to reduce budgets and have some savings. Public buildings, again, someone left, and building department, and we did not fill those positions yet. So that is a savings. Department of Public Works, those are savings in salary line items. As you know, we created the Department of Public Works at our last town meeting, and we committed to reducing expenses by doing so. So that has started. Library personnel, again, a reduction in staff. So none of these reductions are affecting our level of services to our residents. And Dan, why don't you speak to debt and risk management?
Sure. For the debt portion, we actually took out some debt a little bit longer, short term. So those payments aren't coming due until September of 2021. So we're able to close out a portion of that early to help balance the budget. And also for risk management, this is actually health insurance. For this year, we had budgeted for an 8% increase with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We ended up with a 4.9%. And also we had a 15% decrease in May being applied to our November bill. So we're decreasing the amount of the budget for the health insurance for this fiscal year. So all being told, about 360,000 of these decreases will be permanent and not going into next year. And then about 165,000 are one-time decreases, which that 165 includes the debt service.
Yeah, Eric, I have a question.
So we have one question. Was the 65,000 in the DPW slated for anything?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What we're doing is we reduced budgets to help us close the deficit. We had a retirement in the DPW, and then we combined some positions for that savings. But right now, it is there to reduce the deficit that we have in this year's budget.
Okay. Yeah, feel free, and if you want to, ask a follow-up in the questions, feel free. We should be able to see that. That's great. So I think that's always nice to vote on something where we're reducing the budget. Article 3, fiscal year 2021 budget transfers. I believe this article is going to be dismissed. So I guess there are no budget transfers. And Article 4, appropriate for perchlorate expenses from free cash, the sum of $55,000. Jody?
So I think if you all remember, we had budgeted for this fiscal year 110,000, but we split this figure in half, and at our annual town meeting, we asked for 55,000, and now we're asking for the other 55. So this is to allow us to mediate the plume, which we have pretty much completely mediated, but we still have DEP requirements. This number has been going down, and we hope that over the next several years, we'll be able to get this down to 0.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to community preservation funds. Article 5, approve the Community Preservation Committee recommendations. Andrea, were you going to speak to this?
Yes,
Give us a little history on the article.
thank you, Laura. So this is a request to appropriate from CPC funds for the amenity building at the Westford Academy. As those of you who attended Springtown meeting, this was brought before Springtown meeting at that time. It did not pass at that time, but is now being brought back again for further discussion and explanation at this town meeting. We continue to be out of compliance with building codes, and that continues to present ongoing concerns with respect to if we ever get out of, or when we ever get out of COVID, to be able to hold sporting events and other activities, including town meeting or graduation on the field. So this is being brought back again for consideration. If I can also just speak sort of, Laura, ahead, a little bit ahead to Article 6, which is the capital funding. If this does not pass and the town meeting does not vote to appropriate these funds from CPC, then it is also going to be considered under Article 6 as a capital expenditure at that time. So there are two places where this may or may not be considered. Obviously, if it passes, Article 5 passes, it will be dismissed from Article 6. If it doesn't, it will be brought back up for discussion when we talk about capital in Article 6.
Do we want to talk now about sort of the differences in the costs? I know Dan had some comparisons to make between the two different funding models. Is that good to talk about now, or want to do it with Article 6?
I think, we can do
Oh,
it now.
Eric, there's a question.
Yeah, there is one question. I believe Andrea somewhat answered it already, but it's from Erica Cole, and it is, why are CPC funds being used or being requested for this when the special Springtown meeting asked for CP funds to be used for open space?
Again, CPC funds are used for open space. There is an open space reserve fund. I think, Dan, you can probably answer what's in that reserve fund right now. I can't, I don't have that information. So there is funding for that as well. It was brought back to this town meeting at the request of the applicant, and it does have the CPC committee's recommendation and unanimous support for this, along with the select board, the finance committee, the capital planning committee, and the school committee.
And there was a change to the CPC law, basically, that allows these types of projects.
There
This
is, yes. The CPC, this is certainly lawful and allowable under CPC.
Okay. Well, all right, now, Dan, do you want to talk about a little bit the two differences in the funding models then?
Sure. So the option brought forth under Article 5 is to fund this through community preservation funds. It's the 3% surcharge that you see on your tax bill. What we're proposing to do is borrow the cost of this project, which would be just under $164,000 a year for a 10-year note. It won't have any impact on taxes, and the CPA has over $1 million in bonding capacity, so they have plenty of room to absorb this debt at this point. Under Article 6, the fourth motion there, it's the debt exclusion proposal. Now, a debt exclusion does increase taxes. Using the same figures, just $164,000 over 10 years, the average house assessed at $551,000 in Westford would see an increase each year for about $18. It's $18 per year, not $18 compounded. So basically $180 per average household to pay for this. So, there are other options to bond within the levy limit. However, our fear is that the budget is going to be very tight next year. We're not sure what's happening with the state at this time. They still have not set their budget. And so any, absorbing this project within the levy limit will most likely cause reductions to services in other places. And then the other option that we use for free cash, which I'm about to talk about under Article 6, is, for capital, is to use free cash. This would probably wipe out the entire budget for the year if we were to fund this through free cash, and we wouldn't have much left for anything else.
Dan, do you have the figures of what's in the reserve accounts for open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing?
Yeah, I'll
And
put that up
if
on
we
the
do go with
screen.
the debt exclusion using the Article 6, that also requires a
Sorry. So starting the year for FY21 for CPA, we have about 2.6 million in the undesignated fund. Historic, we have 322,000. Open space, this has been the same figure for the past 12, 15 years since we purchased East Boston camps. There is a 10% requirement to fund open space. However, we have debt payments. First it was for East Boston camps the past 15 years. And now it's for the Adams property, which the town purchased a few years ago, which more than makes up the amount for the open space requirement for CPA. And then for community housing, we have 150,000 remaining after allocating to Helena Crocker project last year.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, yep, Eric.
We have a question from Diane Wood. As COVID is now upon us, are there any changes in design needed?
Jody? Yep, Jody.
I would say I have not heard of any bathroom design changes, but we certainly will check on that, and I'm happy to pass that along and make sure. But most people use a stall by themselves, and so I'm not sure. That was not probably a great way to say it, but so I'm not aware of any changes, but I certainly will look into that.
And I think that's the only CPC recommendation under Article 5. Any more questions? No. So Article 6, approve fiscal year 2021 capital appropriations. Dan, that's you, and I also believe we have Christina Green from the finance from FinCom here, who might speak to a couple of the items as well. But Dan, I'll have you start off with all the.
Sure.
There's a lot in Article 6.
So this first section of the motion is appropriating money from free cash to fund these capital projects. Most of these projects were delayed from the annual town meeting, which were brought back again. The capital committee ended up going through and reevaluating all these delayed requests, and we actually delayed some more to the annual town meeting that had previously been earmarked for this meeting. So this is the dwindled down version of the capital plan for the special town meeting. For technology, we have some network upgrades. They need to purchase some new switches. Our infrastructure is aging, and these are the most important things that they need to do to make sure we don't have the system go down. Next item is $90,000 for the school administrative office feasibility study. We just learned this week that the recreation department met, and years prior, they had $100,000 appropriated for a recreation feasibility study. So what they're doing is they're going to Capitol tomorrow to discuss at 1:30 the perhaps combining the feasibility funds, and then to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night to discuss this further. So we're still waiting to see what's going to happen there. Next up, we have $14,000 for the Nebnasset HVAC system replacement. I guess the system is aging, and our director of facilities has suggested replacing it rather than repairing it. This was actually a new request that came up. And the other new request we had was $140,000 for the 51 Main Street Center Fire Station antenna construction. You might have remembered this from last special town meeting. We had appropriated $260,000 to start this project. But we did, after design, other costs came up. There's more construction, and a few other options were included that brought the bid total up to $400,000 total. So they're requesting the additional $140,000. Now, in the recommendations, you'll see that the Finance Committee didn't recommend the $90,000 or the $140,000. My interpretation of that vote was because they are worried about reserves at the year end, and they want to wait to see if any other unexpected expenses came up throughout the year and maybe address these at the annual town meeting. But there's a lot of debate going on in the Finance Committee. Was it last Tuesday? So if you want to watch that, I recommend watching it. Next up, we have an animal control vehicle replacement. We have two very old vehicles right now that don't meet standards. So this has been long overdue. And last, we have the wastewater management design for the tank at Westford Academy. It's to rehabilitate the tank. Originally, Steve Cronin had asked for $200,000, but we decided to break up and do the design now and the $170,000 construction to be requested at the annual town meeting. All right, this next section. Sorry. All right, this next section is all for the water enterprise. They're all coming from water enterprise retained earnings, so it has no impact on the general fund. Basically, they're upgrading their SCADA system, which is like their operating system for the water. They have a dump truck and a utility truck that won't pass inspection come this November, so they're trying to replace those. And also they need to replace the filter media at the Nutting Road treatment plant. They experienced some leaks recently, and this has become more of an urgency since it was delayed from the annual town meeting.
Okay. I think if people have the motion document in front of them, we see that the Finance Committee did not recommend two of the capital requests. So I didn't know if, Christina, if you wanted to speak to the FinCom's position on those two items. We can unmute her.
Sure. I don't know if you can hear me, if someone needs to unmute me. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think Dan actually summed it up fairly well. The the finance committee was a little concerned about our free cash position at the end of the year, and we felt that the school feasibility study could wait a few months. We also felt that the additional funding for the movement of the tower, we completely understand that the antenna needs to be moved. But with 51 Main Street being sort of held back, we didn't see the urgency, since 51 Main, if it does go through in the spring, we'll need to go to a ballot vote, and then we'll also need to go out to bid. So we felt that there was some time built in there to delay that $140,000 this time to the spring, just to give us a little extra cushion with all the uncertainty going on this year.
Thank you. Any question, Eric, questions? Okay.
We did have a question from Erica Cole. What exactly are the feasibility studies hoping to study in terms of the schools and the recreation department?
Jody?
The recreation department came to us a couple of years ago. I think this is 3 years ago that this was approved, I believe. And they were looking for a recreation facility, aquatic center, that sort of thing, following a survey that they conducted in the town. And the school feasibility is to look at what the needs are for the building and then the best location for that. So that's generally what a feasibility does. And I think the thought was that if we could hire someone to look at both those situations at the same time, then that would be better than allocating another or appropriating another $90,000 and having $200,000 sitting there for this purpose. So that's pretty much what happens with it. And so that's what we're trying to see if the public would like us to do.
So the money that you said that the rec department already has, that's already been allocated, so they could spend that tomorrow if they wanted to, or?
Yes, I think due to personnel changes when Pat Savage retired a couple years ago, and then lots of other projects and Forge Beach renovation and Graniteville Fields, and there's been lots of things going on. So they haven't really gotten a good start on that. And the Rec Commission did vote in favor of combining with the school administration and seeing if we could get both studies done within the appropriation.
The original one, so you wouldn't need the 90,000 then.
That's right. And
Okay.
the articles were actually capital articles, so they weren't an article that specified it would just be used for the recreation and no other purpose. It was very kind of more general language, which we do have available. So this is an alternative. You know, money is tight and it's going to be tight in the foreseeable future. So if this was a way to take a look at both those projects at the same time and the public supported that, then that's what we would do. The selectmen are going to reconsider this vote. I don't know which way they'll go on Tuesday night, and the finance committee, I believe, will be reconsidering on town meeting morning.
Okay.
And Capitol's meeting and discussing it tomorrow morning.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to the second motion of Article 6.
Okay, this was another article that was delayed from the annual town meeting. It was to build the Carlisle Road sidewalk south of 110. There's an over 55 community being built at the same time, and they were going to build a portion of a sidewalk, and this will connect that sidewalk from their section on Carlisle Road all the way up to 110 to have access all the way up. It's a bond for $440,000 through the general fund.
Okay. Any questions? Then I lost my page. Third motion.
Third motion is for the Oak Hill, Plain Road, and Moore Road Infrastructure Improvement Project. This is a major project to take place. Basically, the water mains are in need of repair and replacement. They're not suitable for the housing built there anymore. Rather than, make patchwork repairs here and there, our DPW has recommended moving forward and just replacing all the water mains, the drainage, and the top level of the infrastructure all at once. I will say that this project is being funded through a bond through 3 different funding sources. It's going to be $2,350,000 through the water enterprise, $2,020,000 through the stormwater enterprise, and $3,790,000 through the general fund.
No, don't see any questions. Okay, and then the fourth motion, which we've already touched on a little bit, is there anything else we wanted to say about this motion for the facility building?
I would think if Article 5 passes, this will just be dismissed at town meeting.
Any questions? No? Okay. Great. So that's on to Article 7, reduce the amount raised by taxes in fiscal year 2021. Dan,
Right.
we're gonna
So
this.
this is always my article every year for the past 16 years. So this is basically the article that balances the budget. This year, we're applying free cash to cover the deficit and also the FY20 snow and ice deficit. So 110,000 was delayed from the annual town meeting to fund the FY20 snow and ice deficit. So the remaining balance of the 300 or 242,000 is the actual deficit after the reductions under Article 2 are taken. So that's plugging our gap for this year.
And how much money will that, I always feel like someone's going to ask this at the town meeting, but how much money will that leave in free cash once you take that amount out?
I have that right here. So assuming everything passes as we just discussed from free cash, we'll have about 2.5 million left for the rest of the year.
Okay. Don't see any questions. On to some administrative articles. Article 8 is authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept easements on Oak Hill Road, Plain Road, and Moore Road. Sound familiar? Andrea?
These are easements, and they are usually temporary easements that the town takes in connection with the construction that goes on these roads and permits the construction to occur and to happen during this time period. And easements like this are routinely and regularly taken by the town when we're doing road construction, and the residents have already are aware of it and have been informed and notified.
Okay. Eric, do you see there's a question about where the warrant we're using is? It is available on the town website. Oh, Jody, want to speak to where the warrant is?
Yes, it is on the town website, westfordma.gov. It is signed by 3 members, that's correct, but was voted by all members. So it is the most current, and the motions that we're talking about tonight are on our website.
I just posted a link to all of the documents for town meeting for everyone to see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm working off the motions document right now. Okay, so then the next one is another easements. Article 9, authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept easements on Carlisle Road.
And this is the same thing, and it'll be done in conjunction with the construction of the sidewalks on Carlisle Road, assuming that article passes.
Will we vote on Article 9 if the appropriation doesn't pass? Or I don't know. I've never thought about having that happen.
Jody can answer that.
Yeah, Jody. Yeah, sorry.
No, we would move to dismiss this, because if we don't have the money to construct a sidewalk, we don't need the easements. Or if we don't have the money to do the infrastructure on the other Oak Hill area, then we don't need the easements. So we would just dismiss these articles.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. So the Article 10, acquire easements and fund non-participating costs for the Beaver Brook Bridge reconstruction project. Andrea, also you.
So again, acquiring easements in connection with the construction of Beaver Brook. And I believe, Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, Beaver Brook for the most part is a Mass DOT project, right?
Yes, it is. And there's also $75,000 being
Right.
asked for here to fund non-participating costs. But yep.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. Is the majority is through a Mass DOT project funding, and then, as Jody just said, $75,000 is to fund those parts of the construction, i.e., the non-participating costs from by the town.
Any questions? Okay, next up is Article 11, Indigenous Peoples Day, and I believe we have the petitioner here on the call with us, Dr. Harmath. If you'd like to.
Laura, we have a question about the previous one.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
There's a question from Vicky Geary. It's, what is non-participating cost referring to specifically?
Andrea or Jody? Or Dan? I'm not sure.
Sure. Jody, me or you? Me?
Go ahead, Dan. You haven't talked in a little bit.
Okay. I was drifting off a little bit there. So for the non-participating costs for these state tip projects is usually design, any taking of easements, and any landscaping that needs to be done. Everything else is paid by the state, and I believe the amount the state is kicking in is about $1.8 million for this project.
Thank you. Okay, so back to Article 11. So I think what we've typically done at our town meeting previews for the petitioners is that this is a chance for them to kind of give a dry run of their presentation. Angela, is it still the 7-minute rule is still in effect? Or
That is correct.
okay,
It's
so
like a good rule.
so Dr. Hiremath, if you'd like to unmute and speak to your article. And note, this was postponed from the annual town meeting.
All right. Good evening. My name is Chaitanya Hiremet. I'm a resident of Patton Road, and I have a citizen's petition to commemorate Indigenous People Day instead of Columbus Day. Today, I'd like to briefly answer 3 questions. First, what is Indigenous Peoples Day? Second, who is celebrating it? And 3, why is this holiday important? First, Native American history is American history. Indigenous Peoples Day is a holiday that celebrates and honors Native American peoples and commemorates their histories and cultures. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Today, let's remember and celebrate the peoples who are here first. Christopher Columbus started his voyage to find India in 1492, but he ended up in the Caribbean shores, meeting what he presumed to be Indians, but were in fact Taino, that is indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. He used their kindness against them, and many of them were converted to slaves, and he destroyed native cultures and native artifacts. But we still celebrate him. A lot of people have been taught an inaccurate history of Christopher Columbus and his journey to the Americas, one that erases the violence of his actions and attitudes. With all due respect, there's an ugly truth that has been overlooked for way too long. But remaining neutral and pretending like it never happened, or it happened long time ago, or it does not still impact us today, is wrong. It's important to learn the whole story. The violence of Columbus and colonization should not be romanticized in history or honored with a holiday. Today is an opportunity for us to acknowledge the reality of our nation's history, honor the long-standing contributions and identities of Indigenous peoples, and to fight for their Indigenous representation, equality, and justice. Second, the holiday was first proposed by Indigenous peoples during 1977 United Nations Conference. Quote, to observe October 12th, the day of so-called discovery of America, as an international day of solidarity with the Indigenous peoples of the Americas. After 30 years, in 2007, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was adopted by the General Assembly. Right now, 10 US states and 121 cities officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, and many other places are joining the movement to honor the holiday. Third, I'm an Asian Indian American. Less than 1% of the US population is Indian Americans. Thankfully, this demographic is doing extremely well in America. On the other hand, currently there are over 600 native nations in the US and make up about 2% of the country's total population. Yet, representation of native peoples is seriously lagging, and native communities still experience discrimination. There are currently 175 indigenous languages spoken today in the United States, and the number of these speakers continues to decline. The Native American population has high incidence of COVID and other communicable diseases. Reservations are used as dumping grounds for toxic or nuclear waste. Native Americans have lowest high school and university graduation rates in the US. Although the official policy of the United States is now to encourage Native Americans' self-determination, in reality, the power of Native communities is severely limited. Indigenous Peoples Day pushes back on this invisibility. It allows Native people and their perspectives to be centered and celebrated. The holiday also gives non-Native people the chance to gain a better understanding of Native communities, namely that they're still here, they're still relevant, and their identities are valid. Personally, I want Native American community also to thrive. I have deep respect and appreciation for the resilience, diversity, and strength of the Indigenous peoples and their way of life, living in harmony and in balance with the physical world. To conclude, in 2016 in Massachusetts, the Cambridge City Council was the first city that voted unanimously to recognize the holiday. They were followed by cities of Amherst, Northampton, Pittsfield, and Somerville. If successful, Westford will be the 6th town. Indigenous Peoples Day is about celebrating people whose vibrant and fascinating cultures have been forgotten. I strongly urge the residents of Westford to recognize the Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you.
Thank you. That was, according to my timekeeping, under 7 minutes, so well done.
Okay.
Do we have any questions from anyone about this article? No? Well, thank you. I know it's a challenge to do these presentations without visuals, but I think having the chance to speak now is helpful to prepare for town meeting. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right, I guess we'll move on to Article 12. Authorization for the Board of Selectmen to petition the General Court for one additional all alcohol on-premises license to be exercised by a valid or a related entity or a successor and or a sign located at 478 Groton Road, Westford. I believe this was basically another alcohol license, and it is going to ask to be dismissed. I think with the current COVID climate right now, it's not a project that's probably going to be moving forward at the moment. So that is a citizen's petition, but it will be dismissed, or asked for it to be dismissed at town meeting. Article 13, another citizen's petition, clarify the memorandum of understanding between the town of Westford and Westford Community Access TV. This one is also going to be dismissed at town meeting, and so no, we won't have a presentation on it tonight. And then the next citizen's petition is Article 14, a resolution to promote clean energy and reduce fossil fuel use to achieve the Commonwealth of Massachusetts limit of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And I believe we have one or two of the petitioners on the call with us, either Beth or Carol, if you'd like to give us your dry run of your presentation for this article.
Yes, Carol Morse, Wagon Trail Road. I am co-chair of the Westford Climate Action. Westford Climate Action is a grassroots organization of residents deeply concerned about the impact of climate change. We're grateful to the more than 200 people who recently signed our petition to bring this resolution to town meeting. Like many of you, we're alarmed by what we are all seeing with more frequency in the news. Increased storms, droughts, raging wildfires, rising seas, and flooding. Although there are steps each of us can take, we cannot fight global warming only as individuals. We must find actions we can take as a community. We are here to ask the town for a commitment to take decisive action toward the Commonwealth's net zero goal by 2050. Westford is a town that cares about the environment. We have preserved land for future generations to enjoy, passed a bylaw banning plastic bags and styrofoam, partnered with the Commonwealth as a green community, and increased our renewable content to our town's electricity contract. But the scale and increasing pace of the problem requires us to do more. Cities and towns across the country are taking leadership roles to reduce carbon emissions. Westford needs to join them. Neighboring towns like Acton, Bedford, Concord, and Arlington, along with over 30 communities in the greater Boston area, have begun this work. Our resolution simply asks for the appointment of a committee to assess our local emissions levels and to develop a plan to begin that work. It does not ask for money. It does, however, ask for town-wide collaboration and leadership to achieve this. In the words of Governor Charlie Baker, meeting this challenge will require bold action and partnership throughout every sector of the economy. We look forward to working with stakeholders to pursue this target in a way that is equitable and cost-effective. Westford Climate Action believes that for the sake of our children and future generations, we have a moral responsibility to act without delay. We ask for your support of this article. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to note that the Board of Selectmen recommends this article on a vote of 4-1. I forgot to mention that for Article 11. They also recommended a vote of 3 in favor, 0 opposed, and 2 abstentions. So, are there any questions on Article 14? And thank you for your presentation. It was well under the time limit. No, don't see any questions. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming tonight for us to hear your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Okay, so now we are on to general bylaw amendments. The first one, Article 15, to amend the town's general and zoning bylaws to reflect inclusive language amendments to the town charter pending before the general court. I believe there's, Andrea, I'll have you speak to this because I think there's some changes to this article.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, there are changes to this article, and I believe that the select board is going to reconsider this Tuesday night because due to issues that have come up with in context with discrepancies between what some the subsequent zoning bylaws are asking for and changes in the language of current zoning bylaws, we determined that there was a conflict because we cannot make the new bylaws inclusive until we get the old bylaws done. And it became somewhat difficult to see how we were going to get the two to mesh together. In addition, the state legislature has still not approved our charter changes to include inclusive language, despite the fact that town meeting acted upon this a year ago. It still sits in the legislature. Our last communication, I believe our town manager spoke with Senator Kennedy this week. By the time we get to town meeting, it'll be 2 weeks. But has spoken to Senator Kennedy, who says that it is supposed to be brought up on the floor of the Senate within the next couple of weeks, and that he didn't see any, or he didn't foresee any issue. But it seems to make better sense, and town council has also suggested that it makes sense that we postpone these articles until our charter changes are approved. And then if these zoning articles are approved, we can wrap all of that up into one article and bring it back at annual town meeting of 2021.
Okay, so this will be dismissed then.
Yes, that was a long way of saying we're going to ask for it to be dismissed.
But thank you for the history. I think it's important to understand that it isn't being dismissed because it's not something we want to do, but it's just,
Right.
practically speaking right now, it doesn't make sense given that we're changing a lot of other zoning bylaws or we're requesting changes to them in this town meeting. So thank you. Any questions? It's encouraging news to hear that it might be a couple weeks and the charter change will be approved, so that's great.
We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I know. The next, oh, go ahead. The next group of articles are all zoning bylaw amendments. And so we have Jeff Morissette, who is our Director of Land Use Management, to speak to, I think, most, if not all of them. So let's start with Article 16 then. Amend the zoning bylaw to clarify minimum lot frontage requirements.
Laura, before you get going on this one, there was a question on the previous one.
Sorry. Yes.
Emily Teller had asked if Andrea plans to repeat what she just said at special town meeting about the explanation.
Yes, perhaps a little more concisely, but yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Article 16.
Hi, I'm Jeff Morissette, and this article relates to minimum lot frontage requirements. So it was brought to, first of all, I guess, what is lot frontage? In simplest terms, it's the length of a lot that's along the street. So for people who don't know, that's what that is. And our zoning bylaw requires a minimum amount of lot frontage, a different amount in each of the different zoning districts. So it was brought to our attention last year with the zoning board petition that our zoning bylaw, unlike most of the surrounding towns, it doesn't explicitly state that the frontage requirement has to be satisfied by frontage that is continuous. And so we actually had a petition in the last year where there was a amount of frontage in one location and more than 1,000 feet away, there was additional frontage. And they were suggesting that that could be used to satisfy the minimum lot frontage requirement. So it's always been implied to us on the advice of council, we just want to clarify what we believe the intent to always be and simply insert the word continuous in Appendix C in our lot frontage requirement. So one word, adding that to continuous. So I don't know if that's sufficient explanation.
That's great. I want to point out that even if you have the motions document and it it doesn't list, the details of this. They are all available on the town website. You can take a look at the detailed descriptions and the actual changes.
And as Jody mentioned earlier, we plan to have a handout for the zoning bylaw amendments that'll show the red line changes. So.
Oh,
I hope
that's
that
great.
simplifies it.
That's great, yes.
So
Okay,
there's-
Article 7. I'll just let you go ahead and do all the articles because I think you're doing all of them.
Almost all of them.
Almost all.
So Article 17, this is a proposal to change or extend the time for lapse of special permits from 2 years to 3 years. So in 2016, there were amendments made to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9, that allowed the time period for lapsing to change from 2 years to 3 years. However, our zoning bylaw states in a few places that it's still 2 years. So unless we amend our zoning bylaw, we cannot take advantage of that 3-year period. And so what I will tell you is, even if the town chooses to accept this change, which we think is a very good idea, it doesn't mean that they have to have a 3-year time period to lapse. It can be up to 3 years. So if a special permit granting authority wanted to only have it lapse after 2 years, they could continue to do this, but that gives them that option. And what I will tell you is the most instances where special permits have been granted and an applicant has run into trouble exercising the approval within the lapse period is most often with homeowners who go through the zoning board, say they get special permit relief, they have some financial troubles or an illness in the family, and before they know it, their approval has expired, and unfortunately you can't get an extension after the fact. You would have to have a new public hearing process. So this, we think, would most honestly benefit residents more than what you would perceive as the classic developer who ordinarily has land use attorneys representing them and tracking these things. It's also a no-cost way to let permitting be a little more friendly. It doesn't really cost anything, and it's an improvement to the overall permitting process. So we strongly recommend this change, and we hope that you folks feel that way as well. Any questions on that?
Doesn't look
Okay,
like it.
Article 18 relates to clarifying area standards for accessory dwelling units. Most people know accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. They're commonly referred to as in-law apartments, but there's no requirement that the occupants be related to the person living in the main dwelling by either blood or marriage. But we have a couple of terms that has caused confusion over the years to applicants. We have 2 area terms listed in that section of the bylaw, and those area terms are not defined. So it's created a lot of issues, and we simply want to change the 2 undefined terms to the defined area term that's in our zoning bylaw. So I don't know if that makes sense. Okay.
Actually, I had one question on that. Reading it, it said that the cellars and unfinished attics are excluded. Is cellar the same thing as basement? So even if you had a finished basement, would it be excluded?
I believe the cellar might be unfinished, but I can see if I can check that really quickly.
Okay. Yeah, or some sort of dark hole underneath a porch somewhere or something.
Laura, I have a question that came in. Do you want to do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, while he's looking that up, sure.
So Bob Schaefer just wanted me to mention, for all the zoning bylaw changes, the planning board voted 5-0 to recommend.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not in my motions document, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so if you're still awake on this particular article, a basement is defined as a portion of a building partly below grade, which has more than 1/2 of its height measured from finished floor to finished ceiling above the average finished grade of the ground adjoining the building. A basement is not considered a story unless it's 4 feet or more above the finished grade. We have some other sections of our bylaw that could probably use some brushing up too, but that's basement. And cellar is a portion of the building partly or entirely below grade, which has more than 1/2 of its height measured from finished floor to finished ceiling below the average established finished grade of the ground adjoining the building. A cellar is not deemed a story. I suggest you speak with the building commissioner if you need that clarified.
No, I was just curious. I haven't seen the term seller in a while, so thank you for clarifying that.
So where does that leave us?
Article 19.
So Article 19, the planning board is, the short version is the planning board is recommending that this be dismissed at town meeting. They want to do some additional work on this proposed amendment, and so they'd like to bring it back to some future town meeting.
Okay, and this is the amending the zoning bylaw to regulate massage establishments. So, okay,
Correct.
so this will most likely be dismissed then at town meeting.
That's their recommendation.
Okay. Article 20.
So Article 20 relates to an existing section, section 6.3 of our zoning bylaw that relates to growth management. And so this section of the bylaw actually expired in May of 2009. So whether or not you're for restricting growth or not, we think everyone should get behind this and support the deletion of this section from our zoning bylaw, because right now it's taking up 5 pages of our zoning bylaw. It serves no purpose. It's not in effect. And the only thing it does right now is it actually hinders our chances to secure many types of grants from the state. So it's not serving any purpose other than killing trees, taking up ink, and hurting our chances at getting money. So we ask that you consider deleting this section of the bylaw.
Great. And now Article 21 and I guess 22, they're kind of related.
They are related. So I think sometime around the start of this calendar year, perhaps the end of last, the Board of Selectmen had received a number of complaints related to short-term rentals or Airbnbs and such, particularly as they were in residential districts. So they requested that an amendment be suggested. The planning board accommodated their request. They discussed this a few times and they proposed a fairly simple amendment. It has 2 parts to it though. First, they would like to define what short-term rentals are. And they decided after much discussion that if there was a rental period of 28 days or more, that would not be considered short-term rental. 27 or fewer days would be considered short-term rental. And they thought that was a good starting point, and that there could be many occurrences when buying or selling property that there could be the need to have, say, a rental period of a month. And that many of the issues that the complaints brought to the select board was that someone could be living there every other day. There could be 1-night rentals, 3-night rentals. And so that could have a dramatic impact on the character of a residential neighborhood. Whereas 28 days, it's a very different situation. And so that was, they thought, a good place to start. And the intention was simply this: if you want to have short-term rentals in town, first of all, as a principal use, it would be prohibited in the residential districts. So you could not have someone take their home, never live there, and just rent it out all the time. That would not be a residential dwelling at that point. So that would be continue to be prohibited, not allowed. In the other districts, non-residential, you could, with benefit of a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, get approval to do that for short-term rentals. That's the current proposal. And then as an accessory use, that could be permitted within all of the zoning districts, including residential, with still benefit of special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So no one's home in a residential neighborhood could be rented out every day without being owner occupied. It would have to be accessory to the principal residential use. And then the second part to this proposal relates to the Summer Village Condominium Association. So that cottage community, as many of you know, it's seasonal by nature. They cannot occupy the cottages for more than 6 months of the year. It's kind of, they can't claim residency based on living there. They can't register a vehicle. They can't vote by virtue of living there. So it's seasonal. They have always had a rental component to that community. And they even have a rental committee, which I understand is very rigorous and they have actually ceased some rentals on occasion before. So they do some very good self-policing there. So when we were doing some research and figuring out all the short-term rentals, looking online, more than half of all the online short-term rentals occurred at the Summer Village community. And so we thought it logical, since it is different, they self-regulate, and it's not really part of the conventional residential neighborhood, that it made sense to create an overlay district for that community and to allow short-term rentals by right in just that location. So as you mentioned, there are two separate articles. The second article is in case town meeting does not support regulating short-term rentals throughout those districts by virtue of special permits. If town meeting does not support that, we think it still makes sense to go forward and to create a Summer Village short-term rental overlay district such that short-term rentals could continue to be allowed at Summer Village by right. And I hope that addresses that. Is that clear?
Yeah, right. So it basically 22 is more restrictive in what it allows, but 21 and 22 both would allow the short-term rentals in Summer Village.
Yes,
But
21,
Article
22.
Yeah.
Yes. So currently our zoning bylaw is silent on short-term rentals. And so that puts us, when we get complaints, we have to default to any use that's not expressly permitted is prohibited. And so the best thing from first making people aware of what's allowed or not, and in case we have to take enforcement, it's best to have it explicitly called out in writing so that there's a section and a reference, and in case we have to take enforcement or compliance actions. So if we do nothing, we're stuck with the status quo, which is challenging to enforce at best.
And who issues the special permits? Is that the zoning board or the?
As proposed, it would be the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Do we have any questions on this?
Just one for question 20 or Article 23. So I figured I'd wait till we get there.
Yep. Sounds good. Okay. Article 23. Oh, actually, I guess, right. This is the one, Jeff, that I think Bob Schaffer is going to be speaking to. Amend the zoning
Yes.
bylaw to allow drive-throughs for restaurants. Bob, would you like to speak to this?
Okay, I'm Bob Schaffer. So, as you know, I ran and I was elected to the planning board back in late June. During my campaign, I had a number of parents and other individuals in town ask me about what we could do relative to COVID. And I had a number of proposals in terms of what we could look at as the planning board relative to being more responsive to COVID and what we do with zoning. We had a discussion on these different items with the planning board back in July. And the one item that the planning board at this time would like to proceed with and discuss is to allow drive-throughs for restaurants. Now, we've gotten a number of questions from residents who have asked for basically mental health as well as physical health reasons why we couldn't allow drive-throughs, given the fact that we are allowing curbside pickups. And so I will mention that the planning board has voted 5-0 to support this. And some of the issues have to do with, one, you know, we did deal with this back in, I believe it was 1998 and 2013 at town meeting. But now we have some more evidence in terms of curbside pickups. I think providing evidence that littering and excess trash do not seem to be an issue when you're receiving a food bag through your window. We have not seen evidence of loitering and other concerns regarding when residents come to pick up their food at these drive-throughs. So I'm not able to really debate at this time, you know, changing the character of Westford. Yes, that is a concern, but I think the planning board, through its powers, can certainly control how these drive-throughs are regulated. We certainly can control the hours, which has been a concern. I don't believe that we envision lengthening the hours necessarily for drive-through restaurants versus what they are for conventional pickups or curbside pickup. It simply would allow for parents who have asked for this convenience during this troubling time to be able to come with their children and keep them in the car and not have to exit the car to come into the restaurant to pick up their food. It would also allow a resident the convenience to not have to try to call ahead, reach the restaurant, and place an order. They would go conventionally to some kind of an ordering pod and be able to place their order at that location. We also had questions from residents regarding whether or not this would increase the number of curb cuts. And we've looked at this and we can see no reason why there would be necessarily any increase in the number of curb cuts. We envision that any drive-through restaurant would have to have its traffic and traffic flow maintained on site. So we don't think that that would introduce any additional safety concerns. And in fact, we think that in some manner we could maintain the safety of how you do your curbside pickups better. It would also offer convenience during the inclement weather of the winter months, a little more convenience for the restaurant to deliver the product to the customer. So for that reason, we are asking the town to think about allowing drive-throughs and to let us have a meaningful debate at town meeting on this. Again, I was present for the past debates and, I certainly shared the concerns in the past, but I think we have new evidence now. And we also recognize the concerns of our residents who are asking at this troubling time for a little bit of assistance as they cater to their restaurant needs. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to point out that the Zoning Board of Appeals voted not to recommend this article. So, but Planning Board did vote. So I think it will be certainly be
Laura,
an
I have a couple questions whenever you're ready.
Yep, go ahead.
So there's one from Vicky Geary. With the existing infrastructure of many restaurants not supporting drive-throughs, how would you address the unfair competitive advantage that a drive-through gives? Certainly in this age of curbside pickup, is this really necessary?
Again, I guess the planning board doesn't see itself as a regulator of business advantage. We are trying to simply recognize these different options for businesses to deliver the product to the customer. And we do have some concerns about curbside pickup and the safety and the traffic flow associated with those. And we feel that we're trying to do everything possible to offer the safest options for the Westford residents. Next.
I have two more. Christina Green, she's asking, what is the definition of a restaurant? Would coffee shops be included?
I believe it would be. We don't differentiate between food and beverage in terms of how it's served.
Okay, and then another question from Erica Cole. With this topic being discussed as a temporary measure, I'm trying to see, was the topic of this being a temporary measure discussed since this is being proposed to address COVID?
We did not address the temporary aspect because we are not sure of the length of this, and it certainly has raised our awareness of what we have to do during this kind of a situation. So we did not try to address it as temporary. And I should mention that we do recognize that, if this were to be passed in October, we would have to go through the normal 90-day window to wait for the approval from the state for this. And so it's very hard to respond to these in the sense that we started this process back in July. We're now dealing with it in October, and the earliest we would be able to see this as a bylaw would be January. So 6 months is a very difficult window to deal with when you're trying to address something as a temporary measure.
Thank you. That was a lot of good information there. I don't see any more questions on Article 23. So Article 20, this is now we are in the care and custody of town land section. So Article 24 is a citizen's petition regarding the disposition of 63 Main Street. And I believe the petitioner Ellen Hardy is on the call. So I will ask her if she'd like to make her presentation now. Let's see.
She's unmuted and I'm wondering if she's having some issues.
Yep, yeah, I see that her microphone's on. Ellen, we can't hear you if you can hear us. Let's see, I don't know that there's anyone else. While we're waiting to see if we can get Ellen's mic to work, I would note, Andrea, that noted that the Board of Selectmen does not recommend this on a vote of 5-0, and Christina Green had pointed out to me that the Finance Committee recommends this 9-0. So we have some different votes there. So Eric, are you able to send a chat maybe to Ellen?
If somebody has her phone number and wants to call her, they could possibly do it through speakerphone and leave it near the computer. And we could do it that way. We've done that before.
Okay.
I'll try to call her real quick.
Okay, thank you. Maybe while we're doing that, we will cover Article 25 and then we'll come back to 24. So Article 25, which is the last one on the warrant, is home rule petition regarding the Rome Drive extension. I think either Andrea or Jeff were going to speak to this.
I can start and Jeff can fill in any blanks that I leave out. To understand this article, the town needs to have a little bit of history with respect to this. The developer who constructed the development up on Rome Drive and Rome Drive extension went bankrupt before the Rome Drive extension was completed. The town back, I believe in 2008 or 9, I'm not exactly sure, but back then the town pursued a claim in the bankruptcy court against the developer and were successful in realizing funds from the developer that have since that time been held by the town in a separate account. Meanwhile, the residents of Rome Drive Extension took it upon themselves to complete their road and to bring it up to town standards. So at the time that the town took the funds and realized the funds, it was always with the understanding that those funds, any funds that were recovered, would go to the repair and the construction and the completion of Rome Drive Extension. And that was the planning board which led that charge. That was their intention when they did that then. I do know that because I was on the planning board at that time. So what we are now petitioning for, the town, we brought this to town council. Town council said that before we can release the funds to the residents, we actually have to go to the state legislature with a petition and ask for permission from the state legislature to release these funds to our residents because they are in the general fund. So that is the purpose of this article, is asking the town to authorize the select board to petition the state legislature to permit us to release these funds to the residents of the Rome Drive Extension who paid for the completion of their roadway. And I think, Jeff, do you have anything to add?
I think that was an excellent summary. Just in case people are curious, I think back in 2013, the residents collectively paid over $157,000 to complete Rome Drive extension. And presently, the monies available are just over $58,000. So each lot owner, I think, paid out approximately $17,500. And if this home rule petition is successful, they might recoup approximately $6,400 each.
Oh, Eric, is there a question?
We have a question from Emily Teller. She's wondering, is the completion at the residence funded up to the town and state standards?
I guess the short answer is that it's accepted as a public way. It got finished and completed to a good enough standard that the town accepted it. And I'm not sure if I could ask one question. I don't think the planning board is required to offer a recommendation on this, but if you would like one, we still have time to get that prior to town meeting.
Okay, yeah, I know, I see on the motion sheet that it doesn't have it lists planning board, but it doesn't list a recommendation, so not that's something that'll be voted on next week. Oh, Eric, and there's, I think, another question.
Yes, from Bob Schaffer. How would money be dispersed to Rome Drive residents as of 2013 or current residents?
So my loose understanding is I believe they're presently still one and the same. At least that was as of the time that this item was last before the Board of Selectmen. But that's a question we would ask to council. It's probably tied to, I don't know. That would be a question for council. But right now, I don't think we need to know that answer if we act quickly enough.
Great, thank you.
I have Ellen Hardy.
Okay, Article 12, Article 24.
Ellen, you're on.
Thank you so very much. So Article 24 and 63 Main Street, the house that we're talking about is the yellow house that's next door to the Rodenbush Community Center. This is a private home in Westford Center Historic District, and it was built in 1893. So in March of 2016, there was a serious fire in the home. The family moved out, and for the next 2.5 years, the owner of 63 Main Street chose not to sell or to repair the house. But in the fall of 2018, when our town manager, Jody Ross, reached out to the owner then decided to accept bids on the home, and the town's bid was accepted for the house. So at special town meeting the following month, in October of 2018, voters were asked to fund the purchase and also some additional money to do roof repair. And the voters at town meeting said yes. And I was one of those who enthusiastically voted aye. I was so glad that the town would be making the decision about the future of this building. And I assumed that it would be kept as a home in an historic district. But the selectmen did not put the house on the market that fall of 2018. And instead they appointed an excellent task force who were tasked with looking at what the town wanted to do with this building we now own. That task force has a fabulous webpage that you can learn a lot about the history of this house and the work that was done. It's on the town's website, 63 Main Street Task Force. So what they did was they put together a questionnaire with 10 options and asked voters to let them know which of those 10 they would like to see in that building. Only one of those 10 options received a majority of people agreeing or strongly agreeing. And that was the option to sell it as a single family home with an historic preservation restriction on the property. So that was given to the selectmen in the fall of last year, in 2019, just a year ago. But the selectmen did not move to bring that recommendation for the vote to town meeting in 2020. So that's when myself and several other voters who support the building continuing to be a single family home got enough signatures to bring it to the town meeting which we thought at that point would be in the spring of 2020. We did this by petition, which is a right given to all of us by state law. So it has now been moved to the special town meeting next week on the 17th. And we are hoping fervently that the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to sell this as a single family home with an historic restriction. So it will continue to be the beautiful home it's been for over 120 years. In addition, our article does ask the town to keep the very back part of this almost 3.5 acres that abuts the town hall parking lot, so that if in the future town meeting chooses to have additional parking for around the common, there would be acreage there to put 35 more spaces on the town hall parking lot. The Finance Committee unanimously supports Article 24. They see this as a way to recoup the town's over $500,000 investment in the building, to put the house back on tax rolls, which generates $8,000 in taxes a year. Obviously, as a town property, it's not paying taxes. And it would eliminate about an annual $4,200 we are presently paying in carrying costs to keep the house maintained and cared for. The selectmen voted unanimously to oppose Article 24, and they did this because they want to keep their options open. We've put it on the warrant because we don't want those other options considered. They were all on the questionnaire, including the options of having it be a school administration building. Only 34% of the voters said yes to that. And the other was to have it be used for other town offices, and only 23% supported that. So a majority of the voters who answered the poll said they wanted it to be a single family home. A majority carries the day, and so we thought it's time for town meeting to now have their vote on this, it's in an historic center district. It is an historic building. It is an historic home. We hope the people will vote yes and keep it that way. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ellen, for your presentation. Do we have any questions? Okay, looks like we, all right, Eric, yeah, looks like we do.
We have a question from Christy Bates. It says, did the survey identify that the respondent was a Westford resident? And was there a way to restrict one entry per Westford resident?
I'm not able to answer that, Christy. Elizabeth Almeida was the chair of that, and that specificity may in fact be on their website, which is very complete and may tell you exactly the parameters of the questionnaire, but I don't have that information for you. I apologize.
I have another, Laura. This one's from Erica Cole. How would the sale proceed? Specifically, would the town possibly sell the property at a loss given the investments made?
Well, the selectmen legally, probably Jody Ross or Andrea could describe this better than I, but when the town owns property and wants to sell it, it must put out a request for proposals and get bids, and then the selectmen in that RFP establish what the criteria would be. If someone did not offer the same amount of money as the town has put into it, conceivably, yes, the town could lose some money on this investment. But if we don't sell it and we keep it and we're looking at develop it for anything else, we're talking about a substantive capital expenditure, a capital outlay. So even if we lost $100,000 on this deal, the town would be far ahead than we would be if we turned it into municipal offices and made, a large portion of that 3 acres, the parking that would be required for that. So I think we'd still be a long way ahead, Erica, even if we lost a few $1,000s on it.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to make the technology work to get your presentation in. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager, for accommodating my technology ability. Take care.
It worked great. So I think that's it. That's 25 articles. So I thank you all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you to Westford Cat for recording and streaming the event, and to our town employees and committee members for participating tonight. We really appreciate your expertise and insight into these issues. Remember, we need a quorum of 200 voters to convene special town meeting on Saturday, October 17th at 9 a.m. on Trustees Field at Westford Academy. And Jody, yes.
Before we go, I do see that there are a couple more questions on that last article we
Oh,
discussed.
sorry. Okay.
This Christy Bates is asking why, I believe she means the select board did not recommend and the FinCom did recommend. So if maybe Andrea could answer one and Christina Green could answer the other, that might be helpful.
Yes, that would be great.
Sure. So the select board did not recommend it at this time because we still want to look at all of our options, keep all of our options open. There's a lot in play right now. There is not only 63 Main Street, there's 51 Main Street that's being looked at again. There are feasibility studies that are out there that may or may not be funded. So before we make a final decision, we did want to make sure that we don't close the door before we have all our information. At this point, the carrying costs for this are about $4,200 a year, and the select board felt that we could continue that cost at least for another 6 months, and if it takes that long to get the information we want for a future town meeting, the annual town meeting in 2021. So for those reasons, we voted not to support this at this time.
Okay, and Christina, if you're still here.
I am.
Great, thank you.
So I think Ellen actually summarized our thoughts pretty well, but I'll just reiterate that the Finance Committee did take into consideration the fact that the survey, the majority of residents wanted that kept as a single family home. And we also knew that that architects had said that it would be very costly to refurbish that and to create a municipal building out of it. At the time, I think we voted this at least 2 weeks ago, and a lot has changed since then, with feasibility studies and with 51 Main coming back up. If that continues, I will say that there is I suppose there could be, we may reconsider this vote, but at the time, that was our thinking, that we recommended to sell.
Thank you. Any other questions coming in?
That was it.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, and see you all on the football field. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Good night, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks.